Hey friends, it's Brett with Seeking Our Spirit, episode 61. Got to sit down with a new friend today, Dr. James Juarez, and learn about his story and also about the interesting work that his journey has led him to that he is currently in. So I hope that you enjoy our conversation. As always, if you'd like to be on the show, please contact me at seekingourspirit@gmail.com. Appreciate all the support. Keep hitting the like buttons and share episodes. You can hit the support button if you like. And if you're interested in spiritual direction, which is not very different from these types of conversations, if you're maybe in a spiritual rut or just need some help in discernment, you can also contact me about spiritual direction. And that's the same email, seekingourspirit@gmail.com. Hope you enjoy. We'll talk to you soon. Peace. All right, so we are rolling. Welcome, James Juarez, Dr. James Juarez, correct?
Yes.
Thanks again. It's great to meet you, and thanks for being willing to sit down with a stranger and talk about personal things, talk about spirituality in our life. So I really appreciate you, and it's a joy to meet you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Why don't we just start off by, if you want to tell listeners just a brief bio, who you are, what you do, where you're from, those good things.
Yeah, I just moved here to Nashville. I spent the last 16 years in Ashland, Oregon, which is in Southern Oregon. And I practice emergency medicine and just moved out here about 4.5 months ago. And that actually was a spiritual journey in and of itself, of feeling a very, very strong inner call just to be open to move anywhere in the country, which we can talk about a little bit more in depth. So now I'm here and I'm teaching emergency medicine residents. So I've done 16 years of private practice with emergency medicine and have felt called to teach the next generation of doctors. And I'm also leading a physician wellness program and then doing physician coaching for holistic wellness. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm still getting settled into the area here.
Yeah, well, welcome to Tennessee. I hope it's treating you well.
Yeah, Southern hospitality is real.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Well, good, man. Well, so we don't have to stick in this route, but typically I just try to start people out in terms of speaking about their spiritual timeline, as I call it. And I think I explained to you just in our brief conversation on the phone, this is sort of my own personal journey in digging deeper into what does that word even mean? What do we mean when we say that word? And I find, I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram, but it's something
Yes.
I'm obsessed with, and I'm a 9. And so I find myself and learn through other people's eyes. So, so I think that's where this came from. But yeah, so when you think of spirituality in your life, where did your awareness of that, or God, or higher power, or source, whatever label you want to put on it, where did that start in your life, and what did that look like?
Yeah, thank you. On the Enneagram note, I'm a 3.
Okay.
So that's the kind of goal-oriented achiever type.
Yeah.
But with spirituality, it's been a huge journey for me. I grew up in a non-denominational evangelical type of home. My grandfather was a pastor in a Spanish-speaking church. So that's the water I grew up in. I've known that my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to a Christian college called Taylor University, which was hugely influential in my life. It's where I really got a taste of deep, rich community. That's what Taylor specializes in, is holistic, whole person development and community. So I think that's where this idea of holistic wellness, holistic humanity, taking into the mind, body, soul into account with spiritual growth really got into my heart and my DNA. And then after that, I continued kind of in that journey of evangelical, non-denominational realm. And then I'd say around the age of 30 something started to shift in me. I'd say closer to kind of 35, 36, 37. I'm 46 now. And I had a major shift in that journey where I needed something. I wanted something that could hold everybody, every human bar none,
Hmm.
uh, with no judgment, with unconditioned love, and that could just see Christ, God in that person. Um, and so that journey of desiring that, needing that, kind of led to that whole spiritual deconstruction, reconstruction process for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's something I identify with in terms of as a priest in the Episcopal Church. We there's not a lot of, as we call them, cradle Episcopalians these days,
mm,
and so most of the people who come to us are coming from other denominational backgrounds,
mm,
sort of like the one you described. And I was a cradle Episcopalian, so I didn't really know this existed because that flavor tends to be much closer to something like you're describing, at least in my
mm,
experience.
mm.
And I just didn't know until I got deep into the ministry how much religious spiritual baggage people and trauma really
Yeah,
carry with them.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's an interesting, I mean, complex religious trauma and certain ways of thinking is very powerful because spirituality and the church has been a huge part of my life. It's the center of my life. It wasn't just um, spirituality, it was my social life, my identity, my family, my community,
for
my
sure.
friends, thinking about vocation. And so it was a very big journey to go through and dive into the ground of being,
Hmm.
to start to untangle that in order to see what were the golden threads, what was cultural, what was passed down just from tradition, and to really look with a larger lens, to let actually my lens, to realize I had a lens on, to have the courage to let that dissolve
Yeah,
and to go into this realm of unknown was very scary. And I'm so grateful I met Dr. Benner, who's a depth psychologist, Christian author. And right when I was going through this journey at 40 years old, I went into the desert of Dubai. Literally, it's called the Empty Corner, one of the largest deserts in the world. And I spent a week in the desert, had a room overlooking the dunes. You had to drive a couple hours outside of Dubai to get there. And I was just contemplating kind of what do I want for the second half of life. And I actually took the book on the Enneagram by Russ Hudson, and was kind of studying through that and thinking through my patterns and personality. And when I came back, um, through a Google search, I ran into Dr. Benner, and he just started a spiritual community for reconstruction, deconstruction, entering into the contemplative, mystical side of Christianity and into kind of the heart of God, the ground of being. And I immediately resonated with that, signed up for that. And then for the past 6 years, that's been a huge influential part of my journey, and has fundamentally changed and supported, who I am as a human today. I'm so grateful for that community.
yeah. That's yeah. Our stories coincide a little bit there. I mean, Brenner has been real helpful and influential in my life. I actually have a weekly men's small spiritual direction group. It's group spiritual direction that's is sort of modeled on one of his
Mm,
books. I think it's called Sacred Companions. But
mhm, yeah,
let me ask you. You know, I sort of want to stress something that you said because I think for if folks haven't lived this experience that you're talking about, they may not really understand. But you talked about even realizing you had a lens. Um,
mm,
and I think that that's such a powerful image, and I think that a lot of people don't understand, or and maybe never even make that
mm,
recognition,
yeah,
um, that the the way that they're viewing whatever church culture or whatever view of Christianity or any religion really A
Mm,
lot of people never even recognize that there could be another way, or and that you are looking through a certain lens, and so that's an intense experience. And as you said, the courage that takes, particularly if your religious upbringing is one where it's very fundamental, very literalist, very this is the only way. Um,
correct.
it takes
Yeah.
a ton of courage to
Very
challenge that.
scary. Very, very scary. I think, the good news of in medical school, being around very sharp people from all kinds of backgrounds and my peers and colleagues, when we weren't studying or in lab, having just fun discussions about this. So people that would ask very deep questions, just about life and their background, whether it was in Judaism or Hinduism or Islam or humanitarian kind of background, humanism,
Mhm.
secular, agnostic, and atheist, having real deep discussions that really made me ask some questions.
Yeah,
And it's interesting I practice emergency medicine, you deal with everybody, and you don't ask any questions about background. You just are unconditionally there to serve and support who that human is in front of you.
yeah,
So medicine is also, broadened my view of humanity. And then I've taught wilderness medicine for the last 8 years, and we do doctors and healthcare professionals need medical education credits. And so I would teach, but they were adventure trips. So I'd go to places like Mount Everest Base Camp or in Kilimanjaro, in Fiji. And of course, I'd meet people from all over the world, and they would also, challenge my worldview.
yeah,
And then each different, when I worked a little bit at Tenwek Mission Hospital in Kenya, and I've in Rwanda, and was on a board in Ethiopia, and I'm meeting people of not only all flavors and spectrums of Christianity,
right.
but then of different world religions. And I started to see what I call these universal heart postures
Hmm.
of people. And what I mean by that is um, people would be describing their Hinduism to me. And I'd be like, gosh, I know that God. They say this is the God of justice or the God of protection. And in Buddhism, people would be describing their faith, and I would resonate in my heart. And it would be because I knew that heart posture of humility,
Hmm.
of gentleness, of love, of open-heartedness, of surrender,
Hmm.
um, of receiving, of service. And as I let go of these lenses of rigid beliefs and sunk into the ground of common humanity, my heart is busted open now.
Yeah,
And now that's what I listen for and resonate, not just only within my Christian upbringing, because I speak Christianity fluently. It's my mother tongue.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
how, it's how I've thought about God. It's how I've dived deeply into God. So I speak that and I follow that, but I can also hear the heart of God in humans, no matter who I talk to, and I can also see the imprint and the heart of God and the love of God in them, for them, no matter what they espouse as their beliefs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it's so fascinating to me because very again similar journey. I call that I love your wording there, but I sort of called it the mystic thread, in much in the same way. I was a world religion major after I felt called to ministry, just because I love studying all of that and learning about it all. And so, but I noticed, yeah, same thing. Just noticed that, oh, when you strip away some of the, as I would explain it, human imposed dogma and doctrine at the heart of most of these religions, you can find this mystic thread that is really the same core
Mhm.
message. Yeah, so that's great. That's fascinating. And it occurs to me what a gift um, that your life was on this trajectory where you were provided those experiences that expanded you and that you had openness to it, in some ways um, that almost seems uh, divine in and of itself, right? I mean, just that to look back at that journey, that's really a beautiful image too.
Yeah, synchronicity has been a huge part of my life, and being able to, in real time, resonate with the situation or sense what's arising, sense what's emerging. And sometimes it'll be so strong, it has a completely different quality. It has, I can just tell it's almost ethereal. It literally has a quality to it of a presence. And kind of hearing in my heart and paying attention to those synchronicities and having eyes to see those more and more often. But once in a while in life, they've been very strong, very clear, louder than actually someone shouting in my ear.
Yeah.
That's for my major decisions in life. I've had that kind of a guidance and synchronicity and encounters with people, and I'm very grateful. I can feel the fingerprint and the mark of the spirit within that, sense it and see it. I don't always understand it. I don't know where the path is leading, but at those junctions, I can definitely kind of hear like, this is what I'm being drawn to. This is what I'm magnetized towards. This is the gravitational pull of my heart, even if my mind doesn't understand.
Mm-hmm. You're using the words, feel. Is it usually how do those experiences manifest for you? Is it a gut sort of thing?
It's a sensing.
Uh-huh.
It's a sensing of the silence, a sensing of the presence. It's I do have once in a while this pervading stillness of mind, body, heart. There's just a clarity, and so it's deeper than the intellectual level, but it includes the mind. It's deeper than the body and sense level, but it includes the body and the senses. And so this deeper grounded being within the spirit, it's like a spiritual sensing, a spiritual resonating. And then it also, because we're integrated beings, it arises, emerges, and comes into this sensing and feeling, into the sense of knowing. But the perception level of at its deepest is a spiritual like antenna,
Hmm.
a spiritual knowing that's deeper than everything and yet includes and pervades into my whole holistic. It doesn't originate in my mind, doesn't originate in my gut. It doesn't just originate in the heart, it originates in the deepest part of my soul, the spirit.
Hmm.
And then all that together has a signature frequency.
Yeah.
Just as around love and confidence, you have a integrated, attuned, and aligned sense of that message. Just as when anyone speaks and it's aligning, what they're saying aligns with truth and authority and love, and it's embodied and they know it, and they're not speaking out of their intellect, but their experiential being and knowing, and they carry that weight. I know that call from the spirit of God within that spiritual antenna, and then it's so aligned that if it flows throughout my whole being.
Yeah.
And it has its signature mark and a characteristic at each level of the being, in the mind, clarity, in the heart, stillness and peace, in the emotions, a quiet calm, a confidence. There's a certain authority to it, and it just all aligns.
Yeah, that's I love the description there. I You remind me of something I love to do is offer spiritual direction on an individual basis to people, and what you're describing I've never been able to put into great words, but you're describing what I feel and what sort of
Mm,
directs me when I'm doing spiritual direction with people. And I just
mm,
tell them I need to come up with a better way of saying this, really, but because this doesn't work. But I tell them, so we pray, we sit in silence, they speak whatever is coming up in their heart, and I sort of am sensing or listening, if you will, but it's really a seeing, and I keep calling it red flags. I don't mean in a negative
correct,
way.
correct.
Things will just spike. I'll feel or see or sense something, and that's how I know that I need to ask them to dig deeper there, you know.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the resonating and attuning with what's emerging, in every conversation. There's what's emerging in me. There's what's emerging in you. There's paying attention to what's emerging in this relational field amidst and among. And it's just like any other sense. It's seeing with the eyes of the heart, which is really seeing with the heart in the eyes of God. And we use that as metaphor, but this is not, um, I'm not like, this is a real experiential knowing. And so these eyes of the heart are an actual way to perceive,
Mm-hmm.
a way to discern, it's a way to sense. And it's an emergent property that emerges from that attuning to the spirit, abiding and living in God. It's not a formula. It's not something we can contrive. It's an emergent property of the being of God, who's very real and present. And so to be able to see and sense that, and that we're made of that, makes sense. It's just there is a quieting of the other senses, a letting go of those things, and an opening to. Um, and then, of course, like any other relationship, building trust,
Mm-hmm.
speaking honestly about where we're at.
And
And
trusting that sense, right?
correct. And trusting. And trusting is the word, actually, allowing for that and entrusting and relying and following that. And like anything, there's a testing of how that works in our life. Let me put it a different way. There's an experimenting, a playing, with that,
Mm-hmm.
in our daily small things. And as we learn to entrust that voice within us, it then applies within daily conversations and perhaps bigger conversations. But we're building that trust, building that reliance upon that voice within us.
Mm-hmm. This reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever experienced the practice of Lectio Divina,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
I find I do a lot of work with people when we practice this in the church setting of exactly what you're talking about, trying
Mm.
to help people trust the sense within them of when they're in that meditative prayerful state and they're hearing this piece of scripture read various times, um, to detach from the academic Bible study, intellectual pursuit of like what is being said, what's the point of the message, and
Mhm.
rather to trust, oh, this one word or phrase moved me or spoke to me, and to trust that, to
Mhm.
go with that.
Mhm.
Um, I also find it fascinating that how so many of the not well, conflicts, yes, sometimes, but the rubs that people interdenominationally and interreligiously experience, in my opinion at least, really in some ways come down to semantics. We're just not
Mhm.
speaking the same language, but we're talking about the same thing, and people often don't realize it. So they might call what you're
Right.
saying spirit, you know. Some might
Right.
call it energy, some might call it, but it prevents
Very
people from
true.
understanding each other.
That's where I think the Rosetta Stone of humanity is when you speak at the language of the human heart. And so I try to now speak with that universal language, and then I can switch in, I can talk other people's language also. But when you speak at this level, the heart posture, it's universal. When you
Mhm.
speak at the language of gentleness, non-judgment, patience, kindness, deep listening, curiosity, that transcends all language.
Mhm.
And so being mindful of the person you're talking to in the context, and when they say certain words, I try to listen to, well, what's the heart tune of that? What's the Rosetta Stone of that heart posture? And then I can speak that language because we have a common humanity and
Mm,
we all want that same thing. We all have the same needs. We all desire these love and safety and close relationships and meaning and purpose. So it takes practice, I think, to listen at the level of the human heart
mhm,
and to allow the technical language to be what it is. That's what someone grew up in. That's their fluency. That's fine. But when my goal is to connect, then I have to go a little bit deeper, and speak at that deeper common humanity level.
mhm.
Or at least, I put it a different way, I have to listen and see through their particulars the generalities and the connection that I share within their languaging. Even if I don't agree or see it that way, I have to have the ears to hear and the eyes to see and the heart to feel at a deeper language what they're really saying, and then speak from that. And now we have a connection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if only more of us were approaching everyday life and conversations and relationships that way. I mean, again, back to the semantics, I feel so few people, and I don't mean to sound arrogant or judging with that statement, but so few people ever make it to use Richard Rohr's language, right? And you mentioned second half of life earlier, like to break free of that container into the second half of life. So they're
Mhm.
so married to their language and their way that they end up not being able to really maybe even recognize that there is another way to listen or to
Mhm.
perceive, you know.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I respect that. I've grown up in that myself. And so I realize the intentions within that are good.
Hmm.
The intention is is chasing after truth, is trying to be um, safe and secure with God, is trying to live a life of flourishing and thriving. And so because I know that's my parents and my grandparents and my friends and my neighbors who I'm still friends with and close with my family. I've grown up in that, so I try to always hear that and kind of respect that, and let things be. That's the other thing. I've learned to let things be, and as I've been willing and encouraged and come up to barriers that have caused me to face these things within myself. Everything we're talking about is because within my own heart, I've had to wrestle with these things and face these things, and I've had to learn how to do this. It's taken a lot of time, but with compassion and with grace and with patience and with humility and things that I thought I understood with this larger lens, 6, 7 years ago. I keep learning and growing deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper every year.
Mm,
So it's this ongoing journey of discovery, and to the degree that it's within me is exactly how I'll see it in you. The way that I've approached this within myself is if it's with judgment and harsh, it's the exact iota of the degree that I will face it in you.
yeah.
And so once I was seeing the way I would deal with people and it was leaving a bad taste, had undertones and unconscious ways of subliminal subtext and messaging that I wasn't even aware of, I realized, well, that's because this is how I was dealing with myself. This is how I held it.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, I don't like this. I'm distancing people. I'm disconnecting people. I'm disrespecting people, not listening to people. And so as I do this deeper and deeper work within myself, with not needing to fix it or to judge it, but allow it to come into this relational presence with God and love, then let that in its own timing unfold. That's how I now approach people,
Mm,
because that's just the approach that's in my heart.
mhm. Yeah, that reminds me of right. That's in psychology it's said, what triggers you or you don't like in other people is a reflection of yourself.
Mm.
So it's sort of a similar concept.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me about, that's sort of a sense of journey. I mean, would you name anything else? You sort of framed it in terms of church upbringing, and then you began this
Sure.
exploration, and you've been deep into that now.
Mm.
Is there any other sort of touch points that were significant to your journey that you would name?
Yeah, for the last 25 years, this started in college because of my chemistry professor. And at the end of organic chemistry, he said, me and my wife go away every year for a week to think about where we're at in our marriage, with our kids, in our vocation, uh, with God. What are we wanting for the year? And that set off a burning fire in my heart. As soon as I heard that, I was so pulled to that. And I went away to a convent in Indiana. Um, and ever since then, every year I've gone away for 5 days a week. Sometimes I'll fast, sometimes I won't. Sometimes I'll be on a different trip and I'll just add on a week at a resort somewhere. Sometimes I've been in a cabin in the woods, sometimes camping. Sometimes I've taken a vision quest for, in the Chiricahua Mountains of New Mexico by myself under having a spiritual director.
Mhm.
So that practice has been a huge touch point and a central aspect of my life that has helped to let me see what course I'm going, where am I headed, and is this where I want to be going, and a kind of course correction. That's been a big part of my life. And every season that I'm changing, every year that I'm changing, I have that kind of week to reflect. And I go through my physical life, emotional, social, spiritual, vocational, and financial. I go through every aspect of my life. Where am I currently? What's arising in my heart for this season? Wrestling through some things, trying to get a vision for things, and then practically, well, what does that look like to enact that?
Mhm.
That's been a wonderful spiritual practice, for me.
That's awesome. I'm sitting here thinking, and I don't know if that sort of thing comes up in the retreats and teachings that you do that involve other people, but I'm sort of wondering how you handle. I just imagine many people's reaction to something like that is like, well, that sounds great, but that's a lot of work. Like,
What they do, and I just started a business, as a matter of fact. I mean,
yeah.
literally, I just started a business, and I lead my first retreat where this has been so life-giving to me, so life-changing. I mean, so to practice there's a place and time to practice radical honesty and radical acceptance and to stuff you would never say out loud, perhaps, and my biggest fears. That's the place for it.
Hmm.
And so I've written a curriculum and I'm leading a retreat this October. And literally every day, I'm in the middle of kind of finalizing it right now. We start easy with the first day of physical life, your sleep, your health maintenance. Are you seeing your primary care, your dentist, your eye, your weight, how are you doing there? Your nutritional and diet, your exercise and strength for your health. But not only that, I plan it. I'm writing this out so they don't have to do any of the work. They just have to have a heart posture of openness. And I will teach on that first day, what does it look like to have non-judgment and compassion? What does it look like to be radically honest?
Mm.
And I help hold that space, for them. But below these goals, at the level of the heart, I'm also going deeper and saying, what are you most wanting? I.e., what's your heart's desire in this area of life?
Hmm.
What are the obstacles in this area of life? What's the purpose? What's the why below this heart desire? And it's going to be connection with family, connection with purpose, connection. So you're right. It is hard, but I've been working for the last year and a half, 2 years to put this all into writing, to give the gift that was given to me to other people, where they just have to sign up and come on the tree. They're handed a kind of a book of that looks like, ABC. And then my job is to hold and host space and to help people go a little bit deeper and to talk through some of these obstacles and to embody that safety and curiosity, to let them experience in me non-judgment, invitation, curiosity, allowing, presencing, and to go deeper into their heart,
Hmm.
their goals, what God wants for them, or whatever word they want to use. So yes, a lot of work, but I want to simplify that to meet people where they're at, so that no matter who you are, where you are, if you're a human, you have all these aspects I just mentioned, period. It's a universal part of you. You have an emotional life. Whether you're connected to it, that's a different issue. You have a
Right.
physical life. Whether you have a healthy relationship to that, that's a different issue. You are a spiritual being, whether you have certain languaging for that. Well, certainly you do. But to be human is to have that.
Hmm.
Uh, so to give people the space and opportunity to reflect for themselves and to go below their patterns and their cultural knowing and indoctrination, and having the opportunity to dig deep through those layers and ask themselves, perhaps the first time in a long time, what am I created for? What's my heart desire? Not 10 years ago, not 5 years ago, not 2 years ago, but now, today, to give people permission. And I pray God, will be arising in people's hearts and help opening this space is really, a joy and delight to me. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh yeah, I that's exciting, and I that's great, and congrats. I think that's wonderful. I find myself wondering here, is just thinking like, I wish we could sprinkle that consciousness out on everyone, because it's like it strikes me that probably the type of person or where they are in their life that they would sign up for something like that, they're already seeking and hungry for it. They're already on some level, you know,
Yeah.
trying to go deeper. And it just makes me think of like, yeah, I mean, I guess you can't give folks things like this if they're not ready to be open for them, if they're not ready to receive it.
Almost everyone I've ever met, almost everyone, I mean, and I mean this, almost every person I've ever met, when it gets quiet, and usually if I'm just one-on-one, they'll open up about this stuff. It might take some time with them, but everyone has this. It's not always, we don't all have the context and space and freedom and safety and relational capacity and field to presence this, to hold this, to explore this. This is not automatic. What we were just talking about requires a certain amount of safety. What I mean is unconditioned being
Sure.
and an invitation. And so my goal is, I'm starting with physicians, and the business is set up so that, I offer CME through this. It's an accredited, and healthcare professionals usually get CME money through their hospital or their business. And so what I've done is basically it's almost free for physicians. Let's say that you get, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, whatever it is for your CME, your medical education credits. You can use that for my trip because I'm CME certified. So it's just a free thing, and it's labeled under, physician, um, holistic health, physician wellness, avoiding burnout, coaching, and caring for the physician.
Mm.
So, but my dream is that in a year or two, I'll write a book on all this, and then I'm going to open up retreats for just anybody, anyone, that wants, to do this. It's just I'm starting where, um, there's a lot of people interested. The capacity and finances are there. The government mandates that they get their medical education credit. They have money that they either have to use it or they lose it.
Sure.
Uh, and so this is what's been in my heart to start. And then, like you said, I'd love to open this up to everyone. And the coaching I do is open to anyone.
Mhm.
Uh, it's being marketed right now for healthcare professionals and physicians, but I tell everyone, the coaching for everyone right now.
Where, just in case I forget later, where we have, I can think off the top of my head, a handful of physicians that listen to this show. Where should they seek you out if they're interested in that?
Appreciate that. It's called Oasis Adventures, and it's at oasisadventures.com.
Okay, great.
And yeah, and all the information, actually my bio and everything, a lot of stuff we've shared is on there. I kind of opened up my heart, um, on there. So I'm excited because a lot of the things we're talking about sometimes would only be talked about within church or spiritual context.
Right.
But to bring this conversation uh, to everybody and meet people where they're at, uh, they everyone usually wants to grow or have some sort of liberty and freedom and life within these different areas of life.
Hmm.
And the goal is not that someone needs to get to their goal. The goal is to meet someone where they're at and hear where their heart and what their heart is ready for.
Hmm.
And it might be just planting seeds. It might be a new lens. It might be aware that they have a pattern and lens. And it's really trusting the agency of that person. It's trusting that God is working in them, that love is working in them. It's trusting that they do have ears to hear, um, and then partnering with what God is doing. I don't need to use that language when I'm teaching this,
Right.
but this is what I'm doing. I'm listening and hearing that person in front of me, and with no agenda. I just want to see, what are they wanting? How can I be that support that we all want,
Hmm.
to encourage them to listen to that and to leverage my heart and eyes on their behalf to hear their heart and their desires, and help to empower them to hear that for themselves, to follow that for themselves, and to just help coach and guide them for their own clarity.
Hmm.
So they're maintaining their authority, their autonomy, their agency, and I'm there to equip and to empower and to come alongside them to help them be who they are wanting to be.
Hmm.
And they know that every person, with the right listening and questioning, can get there, or can at least, let me say it this way, can take the next step for where they feel like they're wanting to go.
Hmm.
Or at least they might be, a lot of people are very honest and say, I want to go here, but here's the obstacles. And now we're really getting into the deep work of this spiritual work. When people are free to talk about the obstacles and the pain and the suffering. Now we just opened up a whole new ball of wax
Yeah.
of compassion and ways of seeing and being and relating to ourselves. And yeah, it gets me excited.
Yeah. No, for sure. And it's exciting for me. I mean, of course, I'm seeing naturally, through the lens of the church. And one thing that strikes me is like, what excites me about someone like you being out there doing things like this is, I'm very aware that even in Tennessee, in the Bible Belt, um, the general public's perception of Christianity, um, and to some extent to just theism, has changed so much so that even in the Bible Belt, when I walk around with a collar on, because in my
Mhm.
tradition we wear an Anglican collar, um, instead of that being a signal and a symbol of openness and compassion and love, there I feel a turning away from it, and
Yeah.
so I think a lot about, I mean, obviously my work and my job is to serve in this particular context, but I think a lot about, because I care, how in what way does the language or do the symbols or whatever need to be shifted and changed so that people no longer, are resistant, or judging of them right away on the surface level. And so I think that's wonderful. It's great.
And I want to hear about when I talk to so many people, the resistance. I'm so glad they're paying attention to that because I want to hear, well, where's the hurt and the pain coming from?
Mhm.
Tell me the experience that you had. How are you seeing that? How did you process it? What did that mean to you? And almost always it meant exclusion. It meant shame
Oh yeah, sure. Judgment,
that they
shame.
were other. There was an inconsistency and incongruency in something. And so they'll make the specific and then they'll generalize it. And so now I need to listen to the general and hear about the specific.
Hmm. Hmm.
The specifics, when people are willing to engage, where I don't need to defend, I don't need to change their mind. I'm listening to understand. That's where shifting happens. And I've seen it over and over and over that people that are totally against everything within Christianity and the church. And sometimes it takes years of knowing people. They're like, wow, they'll say, like, I can get behind what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They'll say the type of Christianity you're talking about, I've never heard anyone talk about it like that. And
Right.
they're like, actually, if I was to be a Christian, I'd want to be that. And I still want to follow what you're talking about. I'm like, well, fine, great. Let's do that. Let's have that, you
Right.
know, conversation of what does that look like or mean for you?
Right. And this is
My
where, like,
idea.
sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I mean, just this is where, like, sort of living in the way you're talking about. Um, I wish the laity of the church had such a grasp on it because, as I just described, I don't have the same access
Mm,
as you do, or even the people in my church pews do, because I get shut down right away because of
mm,
people's perceptions and opinions. But
mm,
but they have the true power to spread such a love and awareness. If they have that capability. So I love it. I mean, I get energized by it as well, hearing you talk about it. I want to, because I don't want to keep you all day, and I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. I want to also ask, one, I'm just curious about two things for you. Um, One is, as you described, coming from sort of a more um, fundamentalist Christian background, if I can use that word. Um,
mhm,
how has your understanding of God
mm.
shifted or changed? Right, I'm making total assumptions here to it that
No, no,
that
it's
that
good.
when you were younger and in that context, you get the stereotypical judging, vengeful grandfather in the sky, you know,
Mm,
and I would assume that that's no longer the conception that you hold of this thing we call God. Can you speak a little bit to that?
man, oh my goodness.
Sorry.
It's so good. It's so beautiful. Uh, there's a lot of things I don't know and that I'm fine without out knowing.
Sure.
There's a lot more of this mystery and it drives people crazy. Uh, the all of the beliefs that are not bad, I held as absolute truth. It was black or white. It
Yeah.
was this or that. And I've come in now into knowing just about the heart postures of God. I know about unconditional love. I Beyond that, in this deep kind of relational field of love, in this unifying field of love, and this dissolving things in love, I don't know much. I have some theories and I have some loose beliefs, but all of a sudden, this idea of not knowing, of unknowing, of mystery, of curiosity, of saying, well, I have maybe a theory, but I'm open if I have a different experience or someone, I'm open to listen and change.
Hmm.
That little string of sentences, that's completely antithetical to what I would have told you 10, 15 years ago.
Sure,
It's like
sure.
open to change and growing and maturing and letting go of that. Yeah, it's so different. There's a wide mercy, a wide grace, a wider compassion, a meeting everyone where they're at,
Hmm.
a let's see, the knowing of God is basically this knowing of this infinite patient and love and light that will unfold as it chooses at its own time.
Yeah. No, that's
Um,
a great answer. I mean, yeah, and it's just the desire or the need to define it any further is gone, right? I mean, it reminds me of there's a lot of folks that will talk about, and I forget the term for it, but no longer we really shouldn't say what God is, because that's boxing in something that
yeah,
is unknowable fully and infinite. We could maybe say what God isn't. Uh,
that's the Meister Eckhart apophatic and the cataphatic ways of knowing, of the cognitive with cataphatic and apophatic of the
right.
not knowing, and Meister Eckhart of the 1300s of
That's right. The apophatic. That's what it was. Yeah.
the letting go,
Hmm.
the no thingness, nothingness, the no thingness of God,
Hmm.
of being larger. Dr. Benner, actually, Richard Rohr would say of being able to the treasure boxes, the structures, to being able to let that kind of go and unfold, so we can actually touch into the treasure.
Hmm.
Or this is where the language of the ground of being and the mystery of being,
Right. The
you know,
cloud of unknowing. Yeah.
yeah, the cloud. Yeah, that's right. The
Right.
cloud of unknown.
Right. I
And that
also love.
and pardon me, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I cut you off. Go ahead.
That cloud of unknowing, I'll pause, but that's another spiritual practice and way of being that revolutionized more than anything else in my entire life. The welcoming practice, shifted me. But I'll pause because you're going to say
Oh,
something.
I was just going to add, you reminded me of, in a similar line of thinking. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Tillich, he was
Yes,
a Lutheran theologian, but he would say, I'm speaking about the God above God, as a way to
that's
express
yeah,
that. Hmm.
yes, yes. And so being okay without having to describe, although obviously I enjoy description and knowing and conveying the
Hmm.
heart. We can convey our message through our presence, through our being, through our tone. People can feel it.
Hmm.
Uh, but I like having some coherent, congruent thoughts and words to go along with that.
Hmm.
And those may not be the main thing that conveys the message. It probably most likely is the heart feeling and the heart tone and what someone is feeling, quote unquote, burning within them that resonates with this. Deep talking to deep. But I enjoy the messaging and languaging, of that,
Yeah.
even though I don't need to grip it hard.
Yeah, no, that's great. I resonate with that totally. And then also it's like people, these words are overused, so they get tossed away. But truly, I'm also comfortable with just saying God is love. I mean, that's a cliche and gets tossed, but that that's comfortable if it truly, if love is this thing of with no condition.
It's the thing for my own life has been taking all these things into the particular, into the personal, and translating that into the reality of one's own life. That's what I want to do on the retreats. I like experiential knowing, immersive knowing, embodied knowing, and then transformational knowing that comes out of that.
Mhm.
Um, Unless this touches the nuances in the particulars of someone's life, it's hard to engage.
Mhm.
That's what we hope people will do when we speak, but that's not what usually happens.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, God is love, yes. And then the person, when we're really talking about that, will then tell me about, their child dying.
Right.
We'll say, wait a minute, my wife, and we had 7 kids.
Right.
And so then being able to pause and listen, that's just really deep. It's, the big ideas of sometimes hurt me or cause confusion. Um, and I've needed, to be experiential and to have some comfort or not necessarily complete understanding, but just some way of being where love continues to persist and exist in the midst of my confusion, my pain, and my suffering.
Mhm.
And I have ways of being with that and talking about that and being with people because it's born out of my own life.
Mhm.
But that's what I found. This really, everyone wants to, and this is where it takes time.
Yeah.
They need to, well, how does this work out in my own life with my own situation? It's the same thing with positioning. I can talk about certain ways of health, but it's a very specific diagnosis, a very specific immune system to that person, a very specific set of allergies, a specific set of spectrum of degree of their illness that I then listen, attune, physically examine, do diagnostics for them, and then apply something that might be true for everyone, but very specifically and particularly at the right time, the right dose, the right strength, the right course to that person in front of me.
Mhm.
And that's the same thing with our spirituality, that spiritual positioning. It's that nuance, it's that complex, it's that deep, it takes that much wisdom. Yes, it can be that simple, of course, with presence and love. Um, so anyways, when you said I get, that big idea, I just something resonated within me of someone that might be listening, just like I would used to listen and almost cluck my tongue or roll my eyes or like, oh, if you knew. And I know you do know,
Right.
but just that arose in me to speak from my own heart.
Yeah, totally. No, and I agree. Yeah. Um, I'm conscious here. I know that we're coming up on an hour.
I'm actually I'm okay. I'm off of work right now, so yeah, but
Uh,
please.
yeah, well, and that part of it's on mine. I've got my kids arriving
Okay.
from school.
Okay.
But
You do what you have to do. I'm actually in a good spot,
hey,
but I'll let you drive. You
hey, man,
just
but
give me
we can do part twos or whatever. I'm always happy to continue to have episodes
how
with
are you
people.
doing on time? So I get this when I give people a warning of where I'm at usually.
Yeah.
What's your time frame?
I'd say the kiddos will be arriving from school in about 5 minutes. So, um,
5 minutes. Okay, land this plane.
but
Land this plane.
yeah, no, it's all no, it's all good. It's all good. This is what the podcast is. It's just conversation, natural and real with people. So, um, and like I said, we can always do more if that's something that would be appealing. I do want to make sure I ask though, because it's sort of one of the main questions I ask folks always, kind of as an ender, really, on all the episodes is, what do you have moment, one main moment that you would say is the most important or impactful or powerful, quote unquote, spiritual experience of your life?
Well, I love this because you the biggest question that I could probably talk. You're like, yeah, let's see if you can succinctly say this in 3 to 5 minutes.
We don't have to be that strict,
I
but
gave the biggest thing for the end, and we got 3 minutes. Go ahead and go. No, no, I will. I will. So I did some intensive mentoring it, at the high school back in Oregon. And I was kind of done with that. That turned into some kind of working with grandparents and the child. And then when they get kicked out of the house, sometimes do some foster care stuff. They're older, 17, 18, 19. And anyhow, I was done with that work and I got a call from the school and ended up working for 3 years with a young adult. And when they all go off to military college, trade school, I do a rite of passage trip with them, whatever they want to do, fishing, rock climbing, whatever. And this one kid was kind of tanking in school. And so I started working with him his sophomore year and his family, junior year, senior year. And trauma had come from dad committing suicide in the past when he was a young boy. And anyhow, for his rite of passage trip, we went fishing. And I by that time, I had met his siblings and worked with his mom and grandparents. And I collected letters from all of them. And every meal, we went out to the Oregon coast and he loves fishing. So every meal, I would give him a letter. I started from the periphery of the family, from grandparents, and kind of moved in to his immediate family. And we were on the beach, and he was reading a letter from his grandmother, his dad's mother. And I felt a presence, a physical, tangible, as if someone's in the room, come upon us while he's reading this. And he was crying as he was reading this, and he just kind of recounted his whole story and some of his pain and trauma, and tears were coming up. And he had these epiphanies, and he goes, "How can I hate my dad? If I hate my dad, that's to hate a part of half myself. I can't do that." And in that moment, he just kind of forgave and released and let go of all that. And he went through all the trauma of, man, my dad won't be there to walk me down the aisle, and my dad won't be there to, with the grandkids. And he recounted all that. And then this hope of what will replace it came up spontaneously. And he just had this, healing and let go of a lot of things. And I was sitting there just in amazement. It was the same palpable presence that I felt in my inner heart with God alone, that I felt in community. And after that time together, he physically looked different. He emotionally looked different. And on the ride home, he just said, "I feel like a man now. I feel like I'm ready to go off to college."
Mm.
And, I still see him, every year. He's already graduated and he's doing great. And it was the most profound spiritual impact, almost straight out of what you would see in the scriptures. So miraculous. I was one way and now I've changed.
Yeah.
And he let go at 18 years old of 10 years of this embodied psychological trauma and pain and suffering. Now, granted, I'd met with him most weeks for school stuff and mentoring every week for 3 years. But that culmination is the most powerful spiritual moment I've ever had. And I've learned in hindsight, some of that's called memory consolidation. And there's some stuff that happened that intuitively happened, I think, through the presencing of spirit and love that I felt as thick as you can feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since then, I said, this is what I want my life to be more and more about. I want to be, whatever happened through love, I want to be this kind of conduit, presence of absolute safety to let whatever wants to arise within this person arise and transform, and let God do that work.
Mm.
Now, I just was there as a safe, loving, trustworthy, presence.
Yeah.
But what happened was arising spontaneously with no effort or prompting for me out of him.
Yeah.
Stuff that I have never even heard, or maybe PhD writers write about, was coming out of this 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And it transformed him. He fully embraced and replaced this trauma imprinting and was free. He literally was free. And I've seen it now, and I forget how long ago, 6, 7 years ago that was. He's never returned back to the type of thinking or way of being that he was before then. He fundamentally shifted.
Yeah.
And so and I've seen that happen now in physician coaching calls that I do. I've seen it happen with other people, sometimes with mentoring. I'm now working with residents, so I'm trying to bring that kind of presence. And I'm praying and hoping that the invitation with this new business, where these things will happen there. So that's the biggest spiritual thing that's ever happened within kind of community. I'd say even my own life, of a pouring out of my own life and then seeing someone else kind of be transformed, even more than I've been transformed. I'm actually quite honest. I was jealous and envious. I'm like, wait a minute, this kid's having an experience that I haven't even had to a degree.
Yeah.
Uh, so now I've been on hot pursuit of, what happened? What is that? Is there a way, to embody that more and more and more?
That's awesome. That's super powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, yeah, I mean, to just put one word on it, I mean, that's healing, right? That's amazing. Well, listen, man, thank you for, again, sitting down with a stranger and talking about these beautiful and intimate things.
Privilege.
I want to wish you the best on your venture there with and your passion with the retreat. If you ever think of it, I would love to just hear your hear about the experience once it's happened and hear how it goes.
Yeah.
So give me a buzz, but blessings on those efforts. And once again, for folks who are listening to this, if you're interested and in the physician space, that's oasisadventures.com. You can find James there. And then eventually be on the lookout, because if things go according to your desire, then this will be opened up even further than just the medical field. So that's wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you for making space for the conversation. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for listening and for your curiosity and interest. Truly a privilege to share this and to talk and to yeah, to let people that have a similar heart resonance just kind of hear this. And I hope that something in this conversation will arise in them also.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. Well, I'm gonna hit stop here and then I'll say bye to you officially. But thanks again, and let me know. Come back on anytime.
I would love
We'll keep digging. So,
that. Okay, thank you, Brett.
all
Thank
right,
you.
take care, man.